Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the Last Ticket to Capri. The knock was sharp, not urgent. 3 taps. Not the kind to announce a friend or a bill. The kind that suggests a decision's been made before the door is even answered. I was in the office, shifting paperweights and killing time before lunch. Wolfe was upstairs, 11:27, orchid hour, and that made me the ambassador. I opened the door the mandatory 8 inches. No more. She stood with her coat buttoned, gloved, and hat angled just enough to make you think she'd chosen the light. It was sea green, the kind of green they don't sell anymore. Clipped low over dark, curled hair with a veil that didn't quite obscure the eyes. Hazel, intent. She had a leather case in her left hand, and a ring with an oval emerald that would have stopped conversation in most rooms. "I'm Vivian Spallanzani," she said. "I'm here to retain Mr. Wolfe." I nodded once. He's not partial to interruptions before noon. Then perhaps he'll make an exception for a missing person, a torn ticket, and $5,000. I didn't blink. Not on the last part, anyway. "Come in," I said. "Don't touch anything red until I say." I led her through the hall. Fritz glanced over the banister once and vanished like well-trained smoke. I gestured toward the office. She paused in the doorway, gave the place a professional scan, and then stepped forward, letting the sea-green hat tilt just enough to suggest she'd done this sort of thing before. She sat, red chair, left side, like she'd rehearsed it. I waited. She set the case on her lap and clicked it open. Inside were 3 things: a crumpled cufflink in a velvet pouch, a folded ticket stub, and a linen handkerchief, with initials in violet thread. GB. "I'm a theatrical agent," she said. "My client, Giancarlo Bellini, has disappeared." I stayed still. The name flickered somewhere, but not bright enough to cast a shadow. He was preparing a return to stage, one-man show, Italian memoir with musical flourishes. Nothing revolutionary, but personal. He rented a suite near Madison Theatre. That was 10 days ago. And? He hasn't been seen since Wednesday night. He missed rehearsal, then vanished from his apartment. No word, no calls, no sightings. What do the police say? They haven't said anything, because I haven't told them. That earned her a longer look. She met it without blinking. "I don't believe he's dead," she said, "but I believe someone wants him to be." That's when the intercom buzzed. "Yes," I said into it. I heard a voice, Wolfe muttered. "She's wearing $5,000 worth of certainty," I replied, "and green." Silence, then a sigh. "Bring her." I stood. Vivian didn't flinch when I offered a hand. She followed me to the elevator with the gait of a woman who wore elegance like perfume, noticeable only when it passed. Wolfe was seated in the yellow chair naturally. He didn't rise. His tie was butter-coloured, his expression unsalted. He glanced at her, then back to me. "You vouched." I observed. "Good enough." Vivian remained standing. "Sit," Wolfe said, pointing to the red chair opposite. "Mr. Goodwin is more than decorative, but I require the origin in your own phrasing." She nodded, unfastened the case. Wolfe's eyes caught the linen, then the ticket, then stopped on the cufflink. "It was in his coat pocket," she said. "He never travelled without it. The other is missing." "You retrieved it?" "From his apartment. I let myself in." Wolfe lifted an eyebrow, nothing more. "And the ticket?" She unfolded it, placed it on the table between them. I stepped forward and took it. "Linea Marittima Italiana, bound for Naples. Departure, Monday." It was torn diagonally. Only the top half remained. "I found that," she said, "in the pages of his annotated script. Folded, like he wanted it found." "Capri?" I asked. She nodded once. "His childhood home. A villa once seized, possibly reclaimed. He had hopes. He said it was time to return." Wolfe had closed his eyes, but not in sleep. "There's more," she said. "There always is," Wolfe murmured. She opened her clutch and removed a small notepad, the kind you'd buy at Woolworth's. She flipped it open and held it out to me. I took it. On the 3rd page, a notation, W35th, 9B, nothing else. "That's not his handwriting," she said. "And he doesn't know anyone in that building, or didn't. You do? Wolfe asked. No. You read his scripts? I've managed his bookings, yes. I've read everything he wrote. That's not his ink. He never used blue. Wolfe opened his eyes again. They moved to me, then to the ticket stub still in my hand. Mr. Goodwin, assess. Authentic paper stock, I said. The fold's been handled several times. No water damage. And the cufflink? Real onyx. Cheap mount. Someone wanted to make it look sentimental. Vivian didn't respond. She reached into the case and extracted a checkbook. Wrote without hesitation. She tore it off, placed it on the table and said, "This is my retainer, 5,000. I want you to find him before someone else finds him dead." Wolfe didn't touch the paper. He studied her, then turned toward the orchids. He stayed that way for 5 slow seconds, then turned back. "I accept." She exhaled once. "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "acquire a full list of his known associates, rehearsal venues and recent financial obligations. Also a list of transatlantic bookings from the Port Authority, Linea Maritima specifically." "Understood." "Miss Spallanzani," Wolfe said, "you will remain available at all reasonable hours." She nodded. "I don't sleep much." Wolfe's lips barely moved. "Good. Neither does trouble." I saw her to the door. When I returned, Wolfe was already leafing through the notepad. He didn't look up as he said, "Mr. Goodwin, I dislike the stage. It demands too much illusion." "Then this'll be your kind of show," I said. "Looks like someone's rewritten the script." He grunted, which meant start digging. So I did. The marquee outside Madison Theatre had seen better letters. One of the E-bulbs blinked like it was holding a secret. I stepped past it and into the lobby, where old playbills curled behind glass, and the air smelled like varnish and wet curtains. A kid behind the counter raised his eyebrows when I said Bellini's name. Then he pointed me down the left aisle with a thumb that had known paint more than polish. Stage door was ajar. Inside, the main lights were off. One spotlight spilled down from the grid, catching dust like snow. Someone coughed backstage, deliberate, not sick, and a chair scraped against hardwood. I followed the sound. A man with salt hair and a clipboard sat on a crate, rolling a stub pencil between his fingers. His slacks had sharp creases. His shirt was tucked in a way that made it feel performative. "Norris Hemsley?" I asked. "That's right. You from the agency?" "Of sorts. I'm Archie Goodwin. Mr. Bellini's agent has retained my employer." "Mr. Wolfe," he said. "I've heard of him." "Don't believe half of it. Maybe less." He didn't smile, just nodded toward the wings. "He hasn't been in for days. Walked out in the middle of tech run. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't collect the script pages. Just gone." "Anyone see him leave?" "Lightop says he caught him pacing the hallway, talking to no one. Then Bellini turned the corner and didn't come back." I stepped onto the stage. The boards creaked with old ambition. Center stage, taped marks glowed faintly. "He nervous?" I asked. "Paranoid," Hemsley replied. Started carrying his coat indoors. Kept looking up at the catwalk. Twice he refused to say lines because he thought someone was listening from the vents. "You report it?" "No." "Why not?" He met my eye. "Theatre folk get strange. I've seen worse." I wandered toward the stage-left corridor. Dressing rooms lined the wall like tired cabins on a ship. His was the second door. Brass plaque. Bellini. I knocked once, then turned the knob. Inside was a wreck, but not the kind with flair. The chair was upturned. Mirror had a crack through one side, like it had been elbowed, not punched. Makeup pencils were scattered. A coffee cup with dried lipstick rim, wrong colour for Bellini, sat on the windowsill. "Was this how it looked after he left?" I asked. Hemsley stood behind me. "No, it was locked, but I found it like this 3 days later. I assumed someone had come to collect his things. No one confessed." I knelt by the waste bin. Under tissue and chalk wrappers was a scorched corner of paper, half burned. I used my pen to lift it out. "Mind if I keep this?" I asked. "You think it means something?" "Not sure yet, but I like lists." Hemsley leaned in. "What is it?" "Rehearsal schedule," I said. "Names, times, torn. One name circled." "Which?" I unfolded it gently. "Cora Ludlow," I said. His face twitched. "Not much, just the chin." "She came to watch run-throughs," he said. "Voice coach. Knew Bellini years ago." "Romantic?" "Old rumours. She didn't deny them." I pocketed the schedule. Where can I find her? West 35th, apartment 9B. Ah, I said, the address in the notebook. You found that? In his apartment, I lied. He didn't challenge it. I moved toward the wardrobe rack. Bellini's suits were gone, but a black scarf hung on a hook. Silk, monogrammed. GB. Can I take this? Why? Because it wasn't here earlier, I said. And it smells like Bellini. He nodded. Keep it. I pulled the door shut behind us. We walked the corridor in silence. Back in the lobby, I turned to him. You think he's dead? Hemsley's reply came slow. I think Giancarlo was ready to disappear. I don't know if that means he's gone, but something was haunting him. Not someone. He glanced at the exit. Maybe both. Outside, the wind scraped down 44th like it had business. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him. The yellow chair, a book on marine flora in one hand, beer in the other. Fritz slid a tray onto the table without a word. I placed the burnt schedule on Wolfe's desk. Cora Ludlow, I said. Blue pencil circled. He leaned forward, inspected the edge of the page. And? Stage manager says she re-entered Bellini's life recently. No one knows why. Her address matches the notebook entry. Wolfe set down his book. You saw the dressing room? Ransacked, but not violently. Coffee cup with lipstick, mirror cracked, schedule burned in trash can. Was it raining? No. Then the scarf? Dry. Smelled like perfume. He grunted. Good. Send a wire to the shipping office. Ask for any bookings under the name Bellini or Alessandro Grana. That alias again? Indeed. I paused at the door. What about Cora? Wolfe took a sip of beer, then said, Tomorrow. She'll still be there. I nodded. He was right. She would be. Coming off 8th and across 35th, the fog clung low to the buildings. It smelled faintly of boiler soot and old pavement. I passed a newspaper stand where the headlines barked about election recounts and foreign ports I had no plans to visit. I climbed the steps of number 610 and rang the buzzer marked 9B. A woman's voice came through the intercom, clear but cautious. Yes? Archie Goodwin. I'm here about Mr. Bellini. A beat. Then the buzz. The stairwell smelled like soup and linseed oil. 3rd floor. Apartment 9B had no welcome mat, just a brass number plaque and a door with fresh paint. I knocked once. It opened part way. A woman looked out. Her hair was copper brown, brush smooth. She had a pianist's hands and a singer's posture. Her robe was quilted satin, deep navy. Miss Cora Ludlow? Yes. I'd like to talk. Who sent you? Mr. Wolfe. She hesitated, then opened the door fully and stepped aside. The apartment was modest, Persian rug worn at the corners, a small upright piano tucked against one wall, topped with a lace runner and a glass vase holding 2 carnations. I removed my hat and waited. Please sit, she said. I chose a straight-back chair near the window. She sat on the edge of the couch, one leg crossed over the other, ankle elegant, slipper velvet. What is this about? Giancarlo Bellini. She tilted her chin up but didn't look surprised. He's missing. We're helping locate him. I read something in the paper, she said, but only a line. That's because no one's talking, not publicly. Her hand smoothed her robe absently. You knew him. Yes. Recently? I saw him 10 days ago. Where? Here. Did he stay the night? She didn't answer. Did you argue? Now she met my eyes. That's none of your business. It might be. She exhaled softly. We ended it. I told him not to come again. Why? Because he was full of ghosts. Ghosts don't usually carry torn tickets and aliases. She looked at her lap. He said he was leaving, that he had something to finish before he went. He wouldn't say what. I stood and drifted toward the piano. The metronome ticked gently, though no one had set it. Beside it, tucked between music books, was a photograph. Half of one, torn vertically. I slid it halfway free. Don't, she said, but I already had. The photo showed Bellini in a white suit standing on a stone staircase, his arm wrapped around an empty space. Where's the other half? Burned. He give this to you? No, I kept it. I don't know why. I looked at the frame. Simple, brass, no inscription. Did he mention Capri? She blinked. The island. Did he say he was going there? Yes, once, but only in passing. It was a dream, not a destination. He used the name Alessandro Grana. Does that mean anything? She closed her eyes a moment, then said, that was the name of a character in his earliest stage piece, a man who faked his own death. I let that sit. She stood, went to the kitchen. I heard the clink of ice. Would you like something? No, thank you. She returned with a glass of something pale. Do you think he's dead? Not yet. You sound sure. He was preparing something. When people plan, they're usually alive. She half smiled, then frowned. I didn't kill him, Mr. Goodwin. I may have hurt him, but not that way. What about others? He had few friends, fewer still who understood him. Enemies? No, only shadows. That covers most of Manhattan. She didn't laugh. I stood. We may need to speak again. She nodded. At the door I paused. You'll stay available? Yes. And Miss Ludlow, yes? If you see him again, don't burn any more pictures. She didn't reply. I left her there, glass in hand, sunlight creeping across the rug like a reluctant spotlight. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was at his desk, reading Italian shipping logs. He didn't look up. She knew him, I said. Of course. She says she hasn't seen him since 10 days ago. Did you believe her? Parts. Which parts? The ones she didn't say. Wolfe reached for a fresh bottle of beer and said nothing. I dropped the torn photo on the blotter. He glanced at it. His brow twitched. Interesting. Yes, and half missing. A pattern, perhaps. I sat. The day had no intention of slowing down. Neither did the ghosts. The steamship ticket lay between Wolfe's thumb and index finger like a fragment of a puzzle he already knew the shape of. He didn't speak. His eyes moved over the lettering, deliberate, as though weighing each serif for credibility. The rest of the room waited in silence. The only sound was the distant rattle of a delivery cart 2 floors down. I stood beside the desk, watching. Fritz had brought up beer in its proper glass. The chair beneath Wolfe creaked as he shifted. Linea Marittima Italiana, he said. Rome, Naples, Capri. Departure 3 days hence. Correct, I replied. This is the top portion. The remainder? Gone. Torn on a diagonal. He nodded once. Have you spoken to the port? I phoned just before lunch. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I continued. A ticket under the same issue number was scanned this morning. Same ship, different name. Which name? Alessandro Grana. He exhaled through his nose. That again. You know it. A stage persona. Bellini used it in Florence, 1938. A melodrama with masks. You remember the play? I remember the critic who loathed it. Fritz stepped in, refilled the glass, then withdrew. Wolfe resumed inspecting the stub. Describe the contact at the port. A man named Charles Hamber, registry clerk. American, mid-50s. Sounds like he eats typewriter ribbons for breakfast. Wolfe gave me a half frown. Don't embellish. Fine. He was clear. The name was Grana. The ticket was presented. The bearer wore a grey hat and a walking coat with silver toggles. Description matches? Close enough. But it wasn't Bellini. Too short. Wolfe rested the ticket stub on the blotter. His fingers spread beside it, pinky slightly extended. Then he reached for his notebook. Names, he said. Yes. You will contact the following: Emery Leach, Felix Morgenstern, Cora Ludlow, Norris Hemsley, Vivian Spallanzani. Add Charles Hamber. That's 6. Yes. He passed me the slip. I noted the order. First inquiry. Leach. He may have printed the ticket. You think it was forged? Not necessarily, but if one man buys 2 halves, we must know why. I moved to the sideboard, took a sheet of onion skin and typed the list on Wolfe's underwood. The click of keys sounded neat, intentional. When I finished, I handed it to him. He glanced over it and folded it precisely in thirds. Keep this in the file. Shall I start visits this afternoon? Tomorrow. Why wait? Because I've eaten, and the orchids require my attention. Reasonable. Wolfe stood. He was large, still. His hands adjusted his cuffs. He placed the stub into a manila envelope, sealed it, and wrote Ticket Bellini in block letters. "Put this in the top drawer," he said. I did. He left the room. I sat down. The afternoon stretched before me like a corridor in an unfamiliar house. I picked up the phone again. "Port Authority, New York, Passenger Registry." "One moment," the clerk returned. "Yes?" "This is Archie Goodwin, assistant to Mr. Wolfe. May I confirm one detail?" "If it's public." "Was the boarding recorded at Pier 43? "Yes." "What time?" 9:22 a.m. "Thank you." I jotted it down. Wolfe called from upstairs. "Mr. Goodwin?" "Yes?" "Do not forget to question Leach about the printing stock." "Understood. And remind Fritz no tripe this week." "Will do." I hung up. Outside, the city remained the same. Inside, the shadows shifted just enough to let the mystery deepen. The bell rang at precisely 3:42 in the afternoon. Not a second early, not a second late. 3 short bursts. Precise. Decisive. The kind of ring you didn't mistake for a delivery boy or a neighbour with poor judgment. I was in the office, transcribing the last line of a phone message Wolfe wouldn't read until evening. Fritz, polishing the silver candlesticks, didn't even glance toward the door. He never answered it. That left me. I reached it with my usual caution. The 8-inch rule, not 9, not 6. Just wide enough to gauge intent, read a face, and slam if necessary. Standing on the stoop, hat low, coat soaked from the collar down, was Inspector Kramer, looking like the city had spit him out and dared him to come back in. "Goodwin," he said. His tone was dry. His collar wasn't. "Inspector," I said, not moving. "I'd invite you in, but I'm not sure the orchids can take the disruption." He gave me a look I'd catalogued a dozen times, somewhere between "get out of my way" and "this isn't a social call." "Is he in?" he asked. "He's alive. Seated, breathing. That's the best I can offer." "I'm coming in." I stepped back. He entered with the same quiet threat he always carried. Not loud, not careless, just heavy. The kind of presence that left dents in carpets. I took his coat, dripping and coarse, and hung it on the hook. "No, thank you." Kramer didn't do thank yous. In the office, Wolfe didn't rise. He sat behind his desk, legs planted wide, fingers steepled under his chin. The yellow chair framed him like a throne he hadn't asked for but refused to abdicate. A bottle of beer stood unopened beside a copy of Pliny's Natural History. The pages were dog-eared near the section on figs. Kramer took the red chair opposite without asking. Wolfe's eyes opened halfway. "Mr. Kramer," Wolfe said, with the dignity of a man who could wait out wars. "Wolfe," Kramer returned, shrugging tension like it was a collar he'd outgrown. No handshake, no pleasantries. Only that familiar hum of mistrust between equals who knew they'd never agree on a method. "I hope this is urgent," Wolfe said. "It is." I took a seat just to the side. Not too close, not too far. Wolfe gestured toward me with a flick of 2 fingers. "He may speak freely," Wolfe said. Kramer reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a heavy manila envelope, creased once down the center. He didn't open it right away. "We pulled a body out of the Hudson this morning," he said. Wolfe didn't blink. He never did, not when it counted. "Where?" Wolfe asked. "Near Pier 12. Dock worker saw something bobbing in the morning tide, called it in." Kramer opened the envelope, slid a single black and white photograph across the desk. I leaned forward. The face was swollen, but not beyond recognition. Male, Mediterranean features. Hair slicked back from water, eyes shut, jaw clenched. He wore a coat that had once been tailored. One wrist was bare, the other still held a cufflink. Silver, oval, cracked. I looked up. "Monogram?" I asked. Letter B embroidered inside the lining. No wallet, no watch, no ID. Wolfe's gaze was fixed on the photograph. "How long in the water?" 36 hours, maybe less. No bruises, no visible struggle, just marks on the neck. Something soft but tight. Silk, maybe. "Cause of death?" "Strangulation." Wolfe nodded. A slow downward dip of the head. "You suspect Mr. Bellini," Wolfe said. "I do." "And you've come here because?" "Because his name turned up in a harbour call yesterday, and because his agent came here." "Miss Spallanzani," Wolfe said. "You're admitting that?" "She retained us." "Retained or fed you a story?" Wolfe lifted one eyebrow. Her account is under review. Kramer looked at me. You believe her? I believe she had reason to come here. Whether the reasons were truthful, that's still on the board. Kramer tossed another envelope on the table. Transcript from the port registry. Someone boarded the ship Bellini was booked on. Used the name Alessandro Grana. Half a ticket. Fit the profile. Fit how? Grey coat. Silver toggles. Hat low. Clean-shaven. Bellini's known alias. That's enough for suspicion. But not confirmation, Wolfe said. No, not yet. Wolfe sat back. He looked like he was listening to music no one else could hear. Kramer tapped the photo once with the back of his index finger. We pulled one cufflink off this man. We think the other might have ended up in this office. Wolfe said nothing. I'd like to see it, Kramer said. That is not possible, Wolfe replied. Kramer leaned forward. This isn't optional. It is, in fact, entirely optional, Wolfe said. No warrant, no subpoena, no authority within these walls. Kramer's jaw tightened. I could make this formal. You could, Wolfe agreed, but it would be regrettable. I cleared my throat. We do have something you may find more constructive, I said. Wolfe gave a near-invisible nod. I stood, crossed to the safe and withdrew the envelope marked Bellini, ticket. I did not hand it to Kramer. Instead, I removed a folded sheet and placed it in front of him. 6 names, typewritten, clean, no annotations. Emery Leach, Cora Ludlow, Norris Hemsley, Felix Morgenstern, Charles Hamber, Vivian Spallanzani. Kramer read it twice. You think these people are involved? They are connected, Wolfe said, to Bellini, to the theatre, to the incident. That alone is cause for interest. Kramer folded the list and slid it into his coat pocket. You're not giving me the ticket? No. Why not? Because it may yet serve a purpose, and because its presence here offends no law. You're walking a line. I am defining it. Kramer stood. Fine, he said. But if you withhold something critical, and it slows my case, I'll be back, with paper. Wolfe didn't respond. Kramer turned to go. At the door he stopped, looked at me. Off the record, he said. You think Bellini's dead? I paused, then said, no, but someone wants him to be. Kramer nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. He left without another word. The door shut with a weight only solid oak can manage. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Yes. That was productive. Kramer thinks he's holding the stronger hand. He isn't. I replaced the envelope in the safe. Wolfe reached for his beer, took a sip, then another. He believes the man in the river is Bellini, he said. Yes. He is mistaken. You're certain? Yes. Why? Because Bellini would not go quietly. I sat. Then who is the man? That, Wolfe said, is the question we must now answer. Wolfe remained in his chair after Kramer left, eyes shut again, but not in retreat. That posture meant he was not to be disturbed, unless, of course, a corpse came with a calling card. I left him there and went upstairs, where Fritz had resumed his orchestration of the evening meal. Parsley was being chopped, not minced. That meant sea bass or veal. I didn't ask. Back in my room, I reviewed my notes. The body in the river wore a coat with a B, one cufflink missing, hair slicked, mouth closed, no wallet, ligature marks without visible abrasions, strangled, not throttled. But it wasn't Bellini. I didn't need Wolfe to tell me. It felt off. Not just the timing, the attitude. Bellini was a performer. Men like that don't vanish quietly. If he'd wanted to fake his own death, he would have staged it with more flair, and definitely wouldn't have left it up to the Hudson. The phone rang downstairs. I was back in the office before the second ring. Brownstone, Goodwin speaking. Mr. Goodwin, this is Charles Hamber, Port Registry. Yes, Mr. Hamber. I did some digging as you requested. The manifest entry for Mr. Alessandro Grana. It had no passport attached. No passport. None submitted. The clerk took a boarding pass matched to the name and ticket stub and filed it. The man said he'd produce ID aboard, but he never made it on. He never boarded? No, disappeared between the counter and the gangway. Left behind anything? Just the torn stub. That was something. Thank you, Mr. Hamber. That helps. I hung up. Wolfe opened one eye. Well? He never boarded. Wolfe smiled. Barely. Of course not. You knew? I surmised. A performance designed to suggest presence, not establish it. A ghost in the crowd. Precisely. I poured myself a small scotch and opened the file drawer marked L. Found Cora Ludlow's address again and read it like it might change under fluorescent light. It didn't. Wolfe said, "You will see her again tomorrow." Because she's hiding something? Because she's waiting for something. I closed the drawer. You think she planted the scarf? I think she provided the motive. Love or money? Both, in reverse. The rest of the evening passed without interruption. Kramer didn't call, neither did Vivian. That was either good or dangerous. At 8 o'clock, Wolfe dined. Fritz served squab with celery root puree. Wolfe didn't speak during the meal. That was normal. I didn't either. That was rare. By 9:15 I was back at the desk. I ran through the list again. Emery Leach, printer, silent investor in the theatre. Cora Ludlow, voice coach, ex-lover, address. West 35th. Norris Hemsley, stage manager, nervous. Felix Morgenstern, unseen money, Swiss. Charles Hamber, the clerk. Vivienne Spallanzani, the woman in the green hat. All had ties. Some had motives. None had alibis. I turned on the desk lamp and read the ticket stub again. Linea Marittima Italiana. Departure in 3 days. Grana's name inked in the margin, smaller than needed. Stagehand scrawl. Wolfe's voice drifted in. Has Kramer been predictable? Yes. Then he will follow the ticket tomorrow. And when it leads to no one, he will return here. You'll tell him? No. Why? Because the truth is still fragmented. We owe him accuracy, not fragments. It was after 10 when I stepped outside. The pavement was slick, the kind of slick that shines even without moonlight. I walked once around the block, not to clear my head, but to see who might be trying to read over my shoulder. No one followed me. But someone was watching. I felt it. Next morning, Wolfe was at his desk at 9. That alone made the newspapers nervous. He motioned toward the envelope. Bring it. I did. He unfolded the list, scanned it, then drew a red pencil from the drawer. He circled 3 names. Vivienne Spallanzani, Felix Morgenstern, Cora Ludlow. These are the axis, he said. Because of money? Because of history. Miss Spallanzani for intimacy. Morgenstern for concealment. Miss Ludlow for motive. Motive? She was discarded. Jealousy? Resentment, the more refined cousin. I nodded. Shall I visit Morgenstern? No. He will not receive you. We'll draw him out. How? By making his silence dangerous. That's your part. Correct. At noon, Fritz brought in a telegram. He placed it on Wolfe's blotter without a word. Wolfe opened it. His lips tightened. From Naples, he said. Postmarked yesterday, signed G. Bellini? No message, just initials. So, he's alive. He's attempting to appear so. Then who's in the river? A cousin, a mimic, a reflection. I stared. You think he staged it? Yes. Then what went wrong? Miss Ludlow, Wolfe said. She disrupted the script. There was silence after that. Not empty, just deliberate. At 2:15 the phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin speaking. This is Kramer. Inspector, afternoon. I want Wolfe. He's seated, alert, breathing. Put him on. I did. Mr. Wolfe, Kramer said. The body wasn't Bellini. Dental doesn't match. Prints don't match. It's someone else. Yes, Wolfe said. Care to revise your silence? No, but I commend your persistence. You still won't give me the ticket? Not yet. I'll get a subpoena. You do that. Kramer hung up. No goodbye. I looked at Wolfe. He's off the leash. Yes, Wolfe said, and he's running in the wrong direction. By 5 o'clock I had fresh notes. Wolfe had fresh beer. The case was no longer about disappearance, it was about substitution. Someone wanted Bellini gone. He obliged. Someone else wanted him found. We'd been hired. But now the corpse had a different name. Wolfe dictated a telegram to be sent overseas, to a registrar in Naples, confirm Bellini's property claims, historical ownership, transfer records, tax filings. I wired it through Western Union myself. I liked the look of the clerk's tie. That night, Wolfe didn't dine. He sat in the office, hands folded, staring at the chair across from him, the red one. "If he is alive," Wolfe said, "he will reach out again. The mistake is always repetition. He'll write. He'll try. He's theatrical. He won't resist the encore." "And Miss Ludlow?" "She's not done either." I nodded, poured 2 fingers of rye. Wolfe didn't ask for any. When I turned off the light at midnight, he was still seated, still listening, but not to me, to something only he could hear. Fritz's knock came a minute before 11. 2 taps, light, then firmer, the signal for, "You'll want to hear this, but I'm not interrupting orchids." I was at my desk pretending to work on expense reports, which meant I was staring out the window, thinking about lunch. I opened the door. "Yes?" I asked. "There's a gentleman downstairs," he said. "A taxi driver. He insists he delivered something to us by mistake. I told him Mr. Wolfe doesn't accept unsolicited packages, but he says it's a suitcase, labelled for someone named G. Bellini." That did the trick. I stepped out and followed Fritz down. The driver stood in the front room, cap in hand, damp from the drizzle outside. Behind him sat a battered suitcase, brown leather with tarnished brass trim. The tag was plain, G. Bellini, scribbled in block letters. "You bring this here?" I asked. "Yesterday," he said. "Picked it up at Pier 92. Passenger flagged me down, said it belonged to his friend staying on 35th. Gave me the address. Said to deliver it here. No tip either." "Name of the passenger?" He shrugged. "Didn't give one. Foreign accent. Italian, maybe." "Did he say who lived here?" "Just that it was Bellini's place. I didn't ask more." Wolfe's voice came from the hall. "Archie, is there an explanation for the interlude?" I turned. "Possibly. It seems we've received a gift from a ghost." He frowned. "Ghost?" "G. Bellini." He grunted and retreated. I signed the driver's log and sent him off with a generous tip. Then I dragged the suitcase upstairs, where Wolfe waited in the office with a look I've seen only when a meal is late. He didn't speak until I placed the bag near the red chair. "Open it," he said. The latches clicked. I lifted the lid. Inside were 2 neatly folded suits, a starched shirt, a pair of trousers rolled in tissue paper, and a battered leather shaving kit. I lifted a folded towel, white with Hotel Minerva, Roma embroidered in blue thread. There was a sealed envelope marked G. Bellini, though it was empty. Tucked into the side flap were sheets of handwritten music, half-finished compositions in minor keys, annotated in a neat Italian script. Wolfe leaned forward. "Shoes?" he asked. I found them beneath a layer of silk scarves, brown Oxfords, polished to a military shine. "Size 11, I said. "Bellini wore 8s, Wolfe murmured. Fritz, standing by the globe, cleared his throat gently. "Forgive me, but there's something else." "Yes?" He reached into the side compartment and removed a crumpled linen handkerchief. He raised it delicately to his nose. "Pipe tobacco," he said. "Cavendish or something like it. The scent is faint but unmistakable." I turned to Wolfe. "Bellini smoked?" He looked pained. He did not. He detested it. I bent to examine the bag more closely. The side walls had a false thickness. I felt along the lining, pressing carefully, and heard a soft click. A narrow panel slid back. "Jackpot," I muttered. I reached in. It was empty. The compartment was the width of a passport, perhaps deeper. There were scratch marks at the base, as if something had been slid in and out more than once. But it was bare. Wolfe folded his hands. "Someone took great pains to ensure that suitcase arrived here. Yet it is not Bellini's. The label was a ruse." "And what was in the compartment?" "If I knew," he said, "we would not be discussing it." Fritz set the handkerchief aside. It was well used. The tobacco scent lingers throughout the inner lining. I closed the case and stood. "So, someone wanted us to have a suitcase, not belonging to Bellini, but marked as his. It contains clothes too large, music he never wrote, and the scent of a man he wasn't." "Correct," Wolfe said. "And it contains a hidden compartment, empty." which was once full, he said. Of what we must learn. I nodded. You think it was meant for us? No, Wolfe said. It was meant for someone at this address, likely Bellini or someone presumed to be. But that's the trick, I said. Bellini's dead. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Archie, he said, take the case to Saul. Ask him to check the source of the stitching. Italian, likely Roman, perhaps even Capri. The hotel embroidery must be traced. And the handkerchief, have it tested for pipe blend. Ask if he can place it to a tobacconist. You think it's local? I think, Wolfe said, whoever removed the contents was close enough to make the switch in transit. Fritz stepped closer. May I? He asked. Wolfe nodded. Fritz lifted the towel again, inspected the embroidery, then turned to Wolfe. There is a particular laundry mark, he said. Not Roman, not Italian. Oh? He handed Wolfe a note card. Written in pencil were initials. HRM 4123. I have seen similar codes in Zurich, Fritz said. Hotel Regina Margareta, the 3rd floor. Wolfe inhaled slowly. Zurich, he repeated. I'm not certain, Fritz added. But the typography is Germanic, not Roman. I turned the suitcase over. The bottom had a few faint scuff marks. Wolfe said nothing. You're building something, I said. No, he replied. I'm dismantling something. Fritz departed quietly, and I sat again. So? I asked. It was not meant for us, Wolfe said. But it came here, likely because whoever directed it assumed Bellini had resided here, or was connected to us. I leaned back. The name alone? Or the address, he said. But the motive is the same. Someone wants the contents misplaced. They succeeded. Temporarily, Wolfe said. A faint breeze stirred the curtains. I glanced at the music sheets. Shall I have them translated? No, he said. Bring them here. I gathered them into a neat stack and handed them over. He studied the notation, brow furrowed. Not original, he said. These are copied. The paper is new. A plant? Or a message, Wolfe said. But one we can't yet read. The suitcase sat at his feet, mute and unimpressed. You think it was swapped mid-route? I think, Wolfe said, the man who gave the driver this address never intended us to open it. I frowned. Then who was supposed to? He looked at me. I suspect, he said, that depends on who was supposed to pick it up. Silence settled in the room, soft and heavy. The case waited. Wolfe sipped his beer, and I took notes. The Madison Theatre wasn't built for interrogation. Its foyer smelled of powder, old carpets, and applause remembered more fondly than it was earned. I stepped in through the side entrance where the box office girl gave me the same look she'd worn last time. Amusement with a shade of suspicion. Norris Hemsley was in his office, seated behind a desk that had seen more whiskey than work. He wore a pinstripe suit and a face that had been carefully reassembled that morning. The lines around his mouth were drawn tighter than they had been the week before. You again, he said. You boys at the Gazette doing a 3-part series. Not quite. I eased into the red velvet chair across from him. This time I'm not after curtain times or review copies. He lifted a brow. What then? I want to talk about Felix Morgenstern. There was a moment of stillness. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that slips in when someone's rehearsing their next breath. Morgenstern, he said, as if testing the syllables. Yes. Silent partner. Swiss money. Big fan of artistic risk. He took a slow sip from a mug that definitely wasn't holding coffee. I don't know him. But you know of him. He leaned back, fingers drumming once against the polished wood. Why are you asking? Because Bellini was broke. Your play is terrible, and yet it keeps running. Charming. I try, I said. But Felix Morgenstern didn't bankroll this for charm. Norris stared at the mug. He's not involved in production, he said, just an investor. I don't deal with him directly. No one does. Then who does? He hesitated. I think it went through Aldous Meek. The banker, Norris nodded. Morgenstern's money came through Meek's hands, no questions asked. That's not suspicious at all, I said. He shrugged. The theatre runs. The actors get paid. I don't ask why God sends rain in winter. I do, I said. And I ask where it comes from. He looked tired. I didn't kill Bellini. No, I said. But maybe someone Morgenstern once knew did. That landed somewhere behind his eyes. A long blink. A glance toward the window, then he stood. I have rehearsal, he said. Where can I find Meek? 33rd and Madison, he said. 3rd floor, red door. Looks like a place that doesn't want to be found. Perfect, I said, and left him with his whiskey. Aldous Meek was the kind of man you expected to find in a bank vault. Narrow face, grey suit, hands folded like origami. His office had no windows, just a fan on the desk and a clock that ticked like it resented being alive. He didn't smile when I introduced myself. He didn't offer a chair. You've come about Mr. Morgenstern, he said. Yes. I cannot discuss client portfolios. He's not a client, I said. He's a suspect. That got me a twitch. Suspect of what? Bellini's dead, I said. His name turned up in a suitcase. Yours is next to it. Meek didn't flinch. I handle foreign assets, art portfolios, theatre financing. Artistic, I said. He raised a brow. I wouldn't call that production art. Then why fund it? He hesitated, then walked to a file cabinet. From the top drawer he pulled a single sheet, typed, letterhead, Helvetia Continental Trust. This is all I'm allowed to say, he said. The investment was structured as a cultural support grant. Legitimate, transparent. Transparent? He allowed himself a faint smile. By Swiss standards. I looked at the sheet. Numbers, names, and a series of shell companies that sounded like seaside real estate scams. And Bellini? He was named in correspondence once. When? 2 decades ago, in Capri. There was a gathering, artists, writers, financiers. Morgenstern was there? Yes. And Bellini? Meek nodded. He was younger, full of noise, the kind that echoes after everyone's left. Was there bad blood? I wouldn't know. Then why mention it? Because Morgenstern mentioned it, he said. To me, last year, he said Bellini had changed. How? He said he had learned to disappear. I folded the paper, placed it in my jacket. Did Morgenstern visit New York recently? I don't keep his passport. I stood. If he shows up again, I said, don't call the consulate, call me. Meek didn't respond. Outside, the rain had started again. I lit a cigarette and stood under the eave of the building, watching a man across the street lean into a payphone and whisper, like he owed someone something old and sharp. Theatre, banking, Capri. The connections were too wide to be accidental. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was trimming an orchid with the delicacy of a surgeon attending royalty. Well, he asked. I gave him the sheet. He read it in silence, then nodded once. Capri. 20 years ago. And now? Now it's blood and playbills. He looked at me. Arrange a meeting, he said. With whom? With Aldous Meek. What about Morgenstern? He glanced at the paper again. Morgenstern will not come, he said. Men like him never arrive until the music stops. I nodded. And when it does? Then, Wolfe said, they ask who composed it. The cab dropped me half a block from the Madison Theatre. Rain slipped off the brim of my hat as I crossed 48th Street, sidestepping a puddle that mirrored the Marquis. Inside, the lobby was dim and deserted except for a janitor sweeping under the flickering poster of Crimson Vows. I found Norris Hemsley in the back office again. He sat in the same buttoned vest, hands steepled on the same cracked desk, though this time the ashtray beside him held only lipstick-stained stubs. He looked up as I entered, recognized me, and let out a sigh that didn't ask how I'd been. You're getting fond of this place, he said. I've always liked bad lighting and tension, I said. They make me feel nostalgic. He gestured toward the same red velvet chair I'd taken before. What's the angle this time? I set my hat down and leaned forward. Let's try honesty, he smirked. About? Felix Morgenstern. The name settled like a fog between us. He didn't move, but the rhythm of his fingers broke. I don't know that name, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Positive. Odd, because according to Aldous Meek, he owns 14% of this production. His face stayed still, but the pulse at his neck ticked. Meek said that? I nodded. Didn't even need his arm twisted. Norris reached for a cigarette, lit it with hands that wanted to seem calmer than they were. Fine, he said. Morgenstern exists, but I've never met him. Then how do you know he exists? I've seen the paperwork, wiring instructions, trusts. His name's always buried 3 layers deep, never direct. Swiss? So they say. I took out my notebook. You ever hear of a man named Bellini meeting him? Bellini? The playwright, the dead one. Norris exhaled smoke and memory. No, he said. But the way Bellini moved in and out of shadows, it wouldn't surprise me. He ever mentioned Capri? That earned a blink. Not that I recall. Why? They met there, I said. 20 years back, something soured. Norris leaned back. You think this is revenge? I think someone's cleaning up a trail they left too long. He tapped ash into the tray. Meek told you all this? Meek told me just enough to want more. Norris glanced at the door, then back at me. Look, I've run theatres for 20 years. I know when money doesn't want to be noticed. And you didn't ask. Would you? I didn't answer. He took a final drag and stubbed the cigarette out. If Morgenstern is pulling strings, I never felt them. Someone's tugging. He nodded once. Check with Meek again. If there's rot, it's in the books. I stood. Thanks for the velvet and charm. He gave a tired grin. Next time, bring a ticket. Meek's office hadn't changed since yesterday. Same fan, same air that didn't circulate. He looked up as I entered, eyes narrowing just enough to show distaste. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Again. Like a bill you forgot to pay. He didn't invite me to sit. I held up the wiring document he'd shown before. I want the names beneath the trust. I told you they're sealed. Unseal them. He hesitated. Why? Because Felix Morgenstern knew Bellini, I said. And if he's still moving money through theatre, he's still moving secrets. Meek walked to the filing cabinet, slid out a manila folder, and placed it on the desk. He didn't open it. You didn't get this from me, he said. I never do. Inside were bank drafts, handwritten notes, and one photograph. Black and white, grainy, marked Capri 1933. A terrace overlooking the sea. 4 men. One of them was Bellini. Which one is Morgenstern? Meek pointed to a man in a light suit, back turned slightly, face half in shadow. Always the quiet ones, I said. He wasn't quiet back then. No? He ran galleries, bought paintings the Nazis tried to destroy. For preservation? Or profit? It blurred. I slid the photo back into the folder. Did Bellini and he argue? I don't know, Meek said, but Bellini left Capri in the middle of the night. With something. With guilt, perhaps, or leverage. Sounds like motive. Sounds like the past. Not if someone's still dying from it. He said nothing. I stood. If Morgenstern calls, you don't know me. Easily done, Meek said. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was seated behind his desk, yellow chair in full command of the room. I placed the folder on the table. He reached for it slowly, as if each paper weighed more than truth should. Capri, he said, reading. Yes, a gathering. Artists and other ambitious men. He examined the photo. Bellini looks ill at ease. Apparently he left before breakfast. Wolfe tapped the photo. This man, Morgenstern. Yes. And now he invests in theatre. I nodded. Who else was at this gathering? 2 names I couldn't pin. One might be dead. The other vanished after the war. Wolfe set the photo down. If Felix Morgenstern is the key, he said, he must be found. Not easy, I said. He moves like a rumour. He looked at me. Then become one. That night, I returned to the theatre during final curtain. The audience poured out in damp coats and over-painted rouge. I waited by the side exit, collar up, hat low. When the last actor had signed a playbill and the door slammed shut, I stepped back inside. The lobby was empty. A janitor whistled off-key somewhere near the washroom. I walked past the box office into the narrow hall marked private. The office light was on. I didn't knock. Norris looked up, startled. Forgot something, he said. Just a final bow. He stood slowly. You said you'd never met Morgenstern, I said. I haven't. But someone came here last week. Tall grey suit, carried a walking stick. He blinked. Lots of old men wear suits. This one had an accent. Silence. He brought a briefcase, but I continued. Left nothing. Took nothing. but after he left, your payroll account doubled." "I don't monitor." "You do," I said. "And you know he was here." He exhaled. "Fine. One visit." He didn't give a name. "But you knew," he nodded. He looked at the poster, said, "It's better to bury art in performance than in soil." Then he left. "That's all?" "All." I studied his face. "What do you think Bellini took from him?" Norris paled. "I don't know." I turned to go. "If he comes back," I said, "don't offer him a seat." Outside, the city had gone quiet, the kind of hush that meant more rain or more questions. I walked west, letting the street lamps draw shadows on wet pavement, my thoughts turning toward Capri, toward men with half-seen faces and words that had waited 20 years to surface. Tomorrow, I'd tell Wolfe everything, and then we'd see whether Morgenstern still had strings left to pull, or if they'd all frayed in the quiet dark of a forgotten terrace by the sea. The knock came just after the 4th chime of the hallway clock, slow and decisive. Fritz paused by the sideboard, eyes flicking toward me. I set down the teacup and walked to the door. She stood with her gloves still on, grey wool coat, hat pinned like a concession, the same perfume, lilac and something darker. Her eyes didn't plead, they expected. "I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe." I stepped back without a word. She moved like someone who'd forgotten how not to hurry. When we reached the office, Wolfe was already seated, hands tented, gaze unreadable. "Miss Spallanzani," he said. "Or do you prefer Vivian?" She stopped at the red chair, blinked once, then sat. "I shouldn't have come back," she said, "but I have to tell you." "You should begin," Wolfe said. She nodded, smoothed a wrinkle in her coat. "I lied," she said. "That night, the night Bellini disappeared, we were supposed to meet. We were going to leave." "Leave?" Wolfe echoed. "Together. The play's final week was meant to be our last." Wolfe's lips flattened. He had booked passage under a false name. I forged his signature on the manifest, just in case. I stayed by the bookshelves. The fire crackled. She continued. "It wasn't for show. We were in love again. I hadn't planned it. Neither had he." "And the letter he left?" I asked. She looked at me. "He wrote it, yes, but it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for someone else to find, to throw them off." "Who?" She hesitated. "I think Morgenstern." That name didn't fall. It landed. Wolfe's fingers moved slightly. "You spoke to him?" he asked. "No, but I heard him." She swallowed. "The night before Bellini vanished. I went to his apartment. I had a key. That much we knew." "I was early," she said. "He was on the phone. He hadn't heard me come in." Her eyes drifted to the rug. "I heard him say, 'I want what's mine, or I'll make it public.'" She raised her head. And then silence, a pause, and then he shouted it again, louder. "What did he sound like?" I asked. "Desperate." Wolfe leaned back. "Could you tell what he referred to?" She shook her head. "No, but I knew it was dangerous. When he saw me, he froze. I asked who it was. He said, 'An old friend who's become a debt.'" Wolfe shifted in his chair. "And you left?" "No, I stayed. We argued. He said we had to accelerate plans. He kissed me, said, 'Tomorrow we vanish.'" She took a breath. "But the next day, he didn't come. The cabin went unclaimed. I waited in the hotel until midnight." "You returned to the brownstone 2 days later," I said. "Yes." Wolfe regarded her in silence. "You forged the manifest," he said, "but not to mislead the police." "No," she said, "to protect him." "And now?" She looked at her gloves. "He's gone. But if Morgenstern was behind it, then I don't want to protect him anymore." Wolfe nodded once. "Why did you lie the first time?" She didn't flinch. "Because love is foolish," she said, "and I'm still not proud." There was no tremble in her voice, just weight. "I knew I had to come back," she added. "And now that you have," Wolfe said, "you will tell Inspector Kramer everything." She nodded again. "Yes." "Mr. Goodwin will escort you." I reached for my coat. She rose, buttoned hers slowly. "Thank you," she said, "for listening, for not interrupting." We left the room together. Her steps were steady, slower now. Outside, the sky was darkening, but the air no longer felt like storm. Not yet. Not quite. The phone rang at 9:43, which for Wolfe was abominably close to breakfast. I caught it on the third ring, mostly because Fritz had made a cheese soufflé that was occupying Wolfe's attention. I pressed the receiver between my shoulder and cheek and said, "Nero Wolfe's residence. Good morning." A voice like a broken clarinet barked, "Put him on." "Inspector Kramer," I said cheerfully. "Happy Tuesday. I assume this isn't a social call." "Archie," he growled, "cut the gallows humour and put Wolfe on. Now." I glanced through the archway into the dining room. Wolfe had paused mid-chew, fork suspended, eyes narrowed. I mouthed the name. He gave a reluctant grunt and a twitch of his fingers. I carried the receiver in, set it beside his plate and stepped back. "This is Wolfe," he said, barely civil. "I'm not in the mood for any of your smug commentary," Kramer snapped. "You sent me on a snipe hunt." "I beg your pardon," Wolfe said calmly. "That stiff we pulled from the trunk, the one you and your guy said was Rocco Bellini." "Yes?" "It's not." Wolfe paused. "Not Bellini?" "No, we just got the dental records. It's Enzo Caldara, Bellini's cousin." Wolfe laid down his fork. "Enzo Caldara. But I understood." "You understood squat," Kramer barked. "This guy went missing out of Boston 3 weeks ago. Family assumed he'd skipped town. No one filed a report, but we ran the prints and checked the dental charts. It's him." Wolfe let out a long breath through his nose. "Mr. Goodwin will be in touch. Thank you, Inspector." Yeah. Just don't act like you're surprised," Kramer said. "You get your wires crossed for once, and now I've got to find out if Bellini's still breathing." The line went dead. Wolfe stared at the phone, then turned to me. "Pack a bag," he said. "You're going to Brooklyn, and Boston, if necessary." I raised a brow. "You think Bellini switched places with his cousin?" "I think I require confirmation of their association, specifically whether they ever performed together. Anything suggesting a double act." I nodded. "Got it. Want a report before lunch?" "I want the truth before the facts rot," he said. The air over Brooklyn smelled like stale ink and basement grease. I started with the local theatre companies. The name Bellini was familiar to them, though not recently. Caldara was less known. At the third stop, the Marigold stage on Flatbush, an elderly booking agent remembered both. Yes, she said, squinting at my notepad. Bellini and Caldara. Had a gimmick act, the mirror trick, they called it. Twins, practically. "Twins?" I asked. "Not really," she said, "but close enough on stage. The whole bit was about reflections and switched places. One would mimic the other's movements behind a frame. Sometimes they'd swap jackets or hats when the lights dimmed. Audience ate it up." I leaned in. "Do you know when they last performed together?" She tapped her chin. "Must have been 2 years ago, maybe less. Then one of them vanished. I assumed they split up." "Did they ever talk about going on tour?" "They were talking about taking the act to Boston," she said. "New venue opened up, I think. Can't say what happened after." I gave her my card. "If you remember anything else, call me." Back at the brownstone, I relayed the whole thing while Wolfe stared at a glass of beer like it was a crystal ball. "A mirror act," he murmured, "swapping places in plain sight." "They were close enough to fool an audience," I said. "Apparently even a coroner." Wolfe nodded once. Then Bellini staged his own disappearance. "Using a corpse that wasn't him," I said. "But why?" "To gain time, or freedom, or leverage," Wolfe said. "We need to know who benefits from Bellini's absence." "Vivian," I offered. "Or Felix Morgenstern?" "Perhaps both," Wolfe said. "But now we know one thing clearly. Bellini is alive." "And hiding," I said. "Possibly in plain sight." Wolfe closed his eyes. "He might be wearing his cousin's clothes, using his cousin's ID. A complete reversal." "Then we're not hunting a dead man," I said. "We're hunting an actor." Wolfe's eyes opened. "Exactly." The next morning, Saul called from the Port Authority bus terminal. He'd picked up a lead on someone matching Bellini's description, boarding a Greyhound to Providence under the name E. Caldara. Wolfe nodded slowly. "He's shedding skins." I said, "Want me to head up there?" "No," Wolfe said. "We need to focus on those who knew both men, particularly Vivian Spallanzani." I frowned. "She's already cracked once. Then she may crack further." I picked up the phone. Vivian arrived an hour later. She wore a navy trench coat and large glasses that did nothing to hide the tension in her eyes. "I came as soon as you called," she said, sitting stiffly in one of the red chairs. Wolfe gave a cordial nod. "Thank you, Miss Spallanzani. We've received confirmation that the body discovered was not Rocco Bellini." She blinked. "What?" "It was his cousin, Enzo Caldara," I said. Her fingers gripped the chair arms. "Then, Rocco's alive?" "That would be the logical conclusion," Wolfe said. "We believe he staged the illusion." She looked down, silent for several seconds, then she said, "He warned me. He said it would be better if everyone believed he was dead." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "Did he explain why?" "He was afraid," she said. "He said he knew something that put him in danger." "From whom?" "I don't know," she whispered. "He wouldn't say, only that it went back years." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Did he ever mention his cousin Enzo?" "They weren't close," she said. "Not recently. Enzo had issues, gambling, maybe worse." "Was there a resemblance?" She nodded. "Strong. But Rocco was always sharper, more presence. Enzo faded into the wallpaper." "Then Rocco used him," Wolfe said. "Used the body to vanish." Vivian's face crumpled. "I didn't know," she said. "I thought maybe he just ran." "You knew he was planning something," I said. She looked at me. "Yes. He said he needed time to fix it all, that if anyone asked, I was to say nothing." "And you complied," Wolfe said. "Even forged his name on a manifest." She turned pale. I thought it would help if it looked like he left." "You signed his name," Wolfe said, "to help him disappear." She hesitated. "Yes." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Miss Spallanzani, the night before he vanished, did he make a phone call?" She blinked rapidly. Yes. He called someone." "Who?" She swallowed. "Felix Morgenstern." I looked at Wolfe. He said nothing. "They argued," she continued. "Rocco was shouting. He said, 'I want what's mine, or I'll make it public.'" Wolfe's voice dropped.
"Did he say what it was?" "No," she said, "but he sounded desperate, furious." "And Morgenstern?" "I only heard silence on the line," she said. "Then Rocco hung up." Wolfe nodded. "Thank you, Miss Spallanzani. That will be all." She rose, unsteady. I opened the door for her. At the threshold, she turned. "If you find him, tell him I didn't mean to betray him." I said, "That depends on whether he still wants to be found." She left without another word. In the office, Wolfe poured beer. "So Bellini blackmailed Morgenstern," I said. "Or threatened to," Wolfe replied, and then vanished, behind a mask. "Using a cousin with no luck and no future." Wolfe lifted his glass. "A magician's switch. But the real trick, Mr. Goodwin, is not vanishing. It's knowing when to return." He drank. I nodded. The case wasn't solved, but now at least we knew who hadn't died. That was something. For Bellini, the mirror still held a reflection. We just had to find where it cast its light. When Wolfe says, "We must speak with the living before the dead offer their last trick," you don't argue. You check your coat, pocket your notebook, and hope no one at the Metropolitan Archives had early plans for a lunch break. He stayed in the brownstone, naturally, while I did the running. By noon, I was elbow deep in building registries, inheritance records, and one very bored clerk with a yen for lemon cough drops. Bellini's villa, as it had been repeatedly called, had changed hands 3 times in the last 20 years. But the name on the original deed was not his. It was Enzo Caldara's. Enzo bought the place in 1932, 3 years after arriving from Naples. In 1937, a transfer occurred, not a sale. A reassignment, legally phrased as "in trust for a minor cousin, R. Bellini." That trust had never dissolved. Technically, Bellini had never owned the villa. He had lived in it, decorated it, hosted parties and rehearsals. But the land, the bricks, the foundation itself, all belonged to the Caldara estate. I drove back through a light dusting of Manhattan snow with the photocopies in my briefcase and a bad taste in my mouth. A man who hides behind a corpse does not typically share his assets. Wolfe read every line of the deed transfers without comment. When he finished, he tapped a finger on the margin and said, "Mr. Caldera retained ownership." "Bellini was a tenant in feathers," I said. "Pretty ones, maybe, but still a tenant." "That may explain the quarrel with Morgenstern," Wolfe mused. "If Bellini attempted to sell a villa he didn't own," I snapped my fingers. "Blackmail. Morgenstern found out the deed was false." "Or fabricated it himself," Wolfe said. "Then Enzo becomes inconvenient," I said, "especially if he's the real owner." Wolfe nodded. "Convenient, then, that Enzo disappears, and Bellini takes his place. Dead cousin, fake identity, and a very real property," I said. "Quite," Wolfe said. "Call Saul." I picked up the phone. By dusk, Saul had found records of a notary in Boston who handled the reassignment forms back in '37. The notary's signature matched a man who died in 1942, conveniently too long ago to verify anything beyond the ink itself. And the ink, according to a quick lab call, matched a fountain pen brand discontinued in 1935. "Then the deed's old," I said, "or a damn good forgery." "Or it's both," Wolfe said. "Let us consider motive." "Bellini wanted the property," I said, "couldn't get it through honest means." "So he created an illusion," Wolfe replied. "One cousin disappears, the other reappears in mourning, richer by association." "Except Enzo was the owner," I said, "which makes his corpse a deed transfer." Wolfe gave me a look. "Poetic, Mr. Goodwin, but crude." "I'm versatile." "You are," he said. "Get Morgenstern here." Felix Morgenstern arrived promptly the next morning. He had the kind of punctuality money affords, and the kind of coat that suggests the wearer has several more just like it. He took the red chair opposite Wolfe and crossed his legs with a sigh. "More riddles?" he asked. "Perhaps answers," Wolfe said. "We know the body was Enzo Caldara." Felix blinked. "Not Rocco?" "No," I said, "but thanks for sending flowers anyway." Felix adjusted his cuff. "Rocco's disappearance was a shock. I did what decency required." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Did you know Enzo owned the villa?" Morgenstern hesitated. "It was my impression that Rocco had acquired it." "He lived there," I said, "decorated it, performed in it, but he never owned it. Enzo did." Felix's mouth twitched. "That's surprising." "No," Wolfe said. "It's inconvenient, especially if you arranged a purchase with the wrong man." "I didn't," Wolfe cut him off with a glance. "Your firm began drafting contracts to acquire that villa 2 weeks before the body was discovered." Felix exhaled. "Yes, Rocco offered it. But it wasn't his to sell," Wolfe said. "And when you found that out?" Felix's gaze dropped. "I confronted him." "When?" "The night before he vanished," Felix said. "By telephone?" He nodded. "And he said?" Felix's voice dropped. "He said he'd make it public, that I was trying to defraud him." "Was he?" Felix looked up. "No, I believed he owned it." Wolfe studied him. "I doubt that." "Believe what you want," Felix snapped. "I believe you were lied to," Wolfe said, "by a man who lied to everyone." I said, "and then made himself disappear." Felix stood. "If you're accusing me—" "No," Wolfe said, "only questioning your optimism." Felix didn't respond. I opened the door. He left in silence. That night, I went through Bellini's old performance reviews. One stood out, a 1939 article from Le Théâtre Moderne titled, "The Man Who Vanished Twice." It described an illusion he had performed at the Grand Palais. The trick was simple: 2 mirrors angled to reflect a stage from 2 sides. Bellini would appear at one end. The audience would watch his reflection walk toward them, step through the glass, and vanish, only to appear again on the opposite side of the stage. It was lauded as genius. but there was no explanation. Not then, not now. I brought it to Wolfe. He read it twice. Then he said, "He made the audience believe in a reversal of light. And now he's made us believe in a reversal of death," I said. Wolfe tapped the paper. "Find the stage technician who worked that act. Someone knows the mechanics." The technician's name was Raymond Jules. He lived in Queens, retired, with a limp and a library of matchbooks. He remembered Bellini with a fondness he usually reserved for cognac. "He was precise," Jules said, "like a conductor with mirrors." "Was it really a trick of light?" I asked. Jules chuckled. "Yes and no." I raised an eyebrow. "The trick required a double," Jules said. "An exact double. They hired a cousin, rehearsed him for weeks. He copied Rocco's walk, his pause, the tilt of his head." "Enzo?" I asked. "Could be," he said. "Name sounds familiar." "So the audience saw one man," I said, "but two performed." "Exactly," Jules said. "When the real Bellini disappeared, the double walked in reverse, made it look like a single man had crossed a line between worlds." "And now," I said, "he's used the same idea to cross a line between identities." Jules blinked. "You think he's alive?" "I think he's watching," I said, "and waiting for his curtain call." I returned to the brownstone late. Wolfe was in the plant rooms. The orchids didn't need feeding, but he did. Fritz had left him beer and sausages. I poured myself coffee and waited. When Wolfe came down, he was carrying a small paper packet. He handed it to me. "Vivian dropped this off while you were gone." Inside was a Polaroid. Rocco Bellini, dressed as a gondolier, standing beside a man I now recognized as Enzo Caldara. They were leaning against a prop gondola in full regalia. Identical costumes, identical smiles. "What year?" I asked. "Back says 1939 Paris," Wolfe said. "So they did it more than once," I said. "Perfect the mirror trick." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and now he's done it again. But this time, the exit was real." I studied the photo. "If he's alive, he'll want to reclaim something." Wolfe nodded. "Or burn what remains." At 10:42 the next morning, the bell rang. I opened the door. The man standing there wore a dark coat, a tweed cap, and a tentative smile. He looked like Bellini, if Bellini had aged 10 years and been turned inside out by guilt. "My name is Lorenzo," he said softly. "I think you're looking for me." I didn't say a word. I stepped aside and let him in. He removed his cap and coat and sat in the red chair without being asked. Wolfe watched him without blinking. "You're Rocco Bellini," Wolfe said. "Yes," the man replied. "You faked your death," Wolfe said. "Yes." "You used your cousin's body." He nodded. "He owed me." I said, "That's a hell of a debt to collect." Bellini looked at me. "Enzo was dying. He had nothing. He agreed to help me disappear." "And then he died?" "He chose to," Bellini said. "I didn't kill him." Wolfe said, "That will be difficult to prove." "I have a letter," Bellini said, "signed, dated. He said this was his way out and my way forward." "Why?" I asked. "Because I discovered the villa was never mine," he said. "Felix tried to buy it. I tried to sell it. But when I saw the deed, it all fell apart." "So you vanished?" He nodded. "I needed time and revenge." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "Revenge?" "Felix knew," he said. "He knew the deed was false, but he pushed anyway." I said, "So now what?" Bellini smiled. "Now I reappear." Wolfe said, "The police will want a statement." "I'm prepared." "You'll be charged," I said. "Maybe," he replied, "but at least I'll be seen." He rose. I opened the door again. Outside, the snow had returned. A thin layer coated the city in forgetfulness. Bellini stepped into it like a man walking into his own reflection. Wolfe sipped his beer. "In the end," he said, "the villa wasn't lost." No, I said, just miscast. We watched the street a while longer. Then I returned to the office and filed the photo. Next to it, I wrote, "Truth doesn't vanish. It only waits for the lights to shift." Fritz placed the morning tray gently on the desk. There were 5 items on it: 1 boiled egg, a silver pot of coffee, a folded copy of the Gazette, a dish of sliced peach, and, tucked beneath the saucer, a cream-colored postcard. Wolfe looked up from the egg. His gaze landed on the card before the peach. "Not for me," he said. "No," Fritz replied. "Addressed to Miss Cora Ludlow. But it came to us." Wolfe reached for it with care. I stood behind the desk, coffee in hand, watching his eyes scan the front, then the back. The stamp was Italian, the ink deep violet, the postmark Napoli. He read aloud. "To Cora, all debts paid, all curtains drawn, R." There was no mistaking the signature's flourish. Wolfe passed it to me. "Bellini's hand." I nodded. "But why send it here?" He took a long sip of coffee. "To make sure it passed through trustworthy hands." There was a small smudge under the signature, brownish gray, faint but distinct. I angled it to the light. "Thumbprint?" I asked. He nodded once. "Fritz, the kit." Fritz retrieved the fingerprint kit from the drawer in the front hall cabinet. We lifted the print with care, dusted it, and slid it into the comparator. Wolfe had a record of Enzo Caldara's fingerprint, lifted from a compact mirror found in the villa's guest room weeks ago, a trivial vanity left behind. At the time, we had presumed it belonged to Cora. Now it proved otherwise. A match. Enzo. I looked at Wolfe. "So, Bellini is dead?" "No," he said. "He never was." "You're saying—" "I am saying," Wolfe cut in, "that the man we buried as Bellini was Enzo. That thumbprint, left in theatrical defiance, confirms it." "But who wrote the card?" He leaned back. "The same man who staged his own vanishing act. The same man who convinced the world that Enzo had died long ago. That trick required mirrors, timing, and a clean slate. Now he's wiping the last one. Then Bellini is alive, and Cora has joined him." I stared at the card. "We have to find her." Wolfe glanced at the clock. "You have less than an hour." "For what?" "For whatever she left behind. She will have departed today." "How do you know?" He tapped the peach dish. "Because she always ordered peaches on the last day of every visit. Fritz sliced these from the ones she gave us yesterday." I didn't ask how he noticed. I ran. Her building on West 87th was quiet, the sort of quiet that clung to upholstery and heavy curtains. I buzzed her apartment. No answer. I buzzed again, waited, and buzzed the downstairs neighbor. A young man in slippers and wire-frame glasses answered. "Cora Ludlow?" I asked. "She left this morning," he said. "Early, before the milk came." "Alone?" He shook his head. "No, with a man. Gray suit, slight limp. They had 2 trunks. The cab was waiting by 6 o'clock." "Did you get the name?" "No," he said, "but he called her Cara." I nodded. "Thanks." Back on the street, I stood in the thin slant of sunlight, watching a child across the street throw bread to pigeons. I pulled the postcard from my coat. The ink was dry, the print distinct. Cara, a stage name, a truth worn as fiction. They'd planned it. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had not moved. The empty eggshell sat in the dish. The coffee pot had cooled. "She's gone," I said. He raised a brow. "Where?" "Don't know. Took 2 trunks and a man in gray." "Not Bellini?" "Enzo," I said, "but not quite. Neighbors saw the limp." Wolfe nodded once. "She has chosen exile over exposure." I crossed to the windows. The snow had melted. Manhattan pulsed below, unaware. "What was the point of the card?" I asked. "To say farewell," Wolfe said. "To us?" "No," he said, "to her past." I walked to the desk and laid the card down. The orchid thumbprint caught the lamplight. Do we tell Kramer? Wolfe exhaled. No. He'll want to know? He'll have his corpse, Wolfe said, and his forensics. Let him keep them. We shall keep the truth. I sat. You think they'll make it? I do not know, Wolfe said. Seems unfair. Justice is not fairness, he replied, and not all crimes warrant a cell. I said nothing for a long while. Then I asked, what will you do with the card? He reached for the cigar box and opened it. Inside, among the matches and ribbons, he placed the postcard face down. He said, let the sea keep some secrets. And he poured himself another cup of coffee. The dining room was too warm, the windows shut tight against the autumn bite outside. Fritz had drawn the curtains and dimmed the chandelier. The scent of Madeira clung faintly to the air. Wolfe sat, centered in his yellow chair like a magistrate presiding over a trial, with no need for jury or gavel. Across from him, the red chairs held their occupants stiffly. Cora Ludlow's gloved hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her hair was pinned, her posture impeccable, her gaze unreadable. To her left, Morgenstern fidgeted, chewing on nothing. Emery Leach sat beside him, arms crossed, face pale. Enzo stood behind them, leaning against the wall with a limp barely concealed. I was off to the side, standing, pad in hand, pencil unused. Wolfe hadn't asked for notes. That meant this was not for the record. This was a reckoning. Wolfe cleared his throat. Mr. Leach, Mr. Morgenstern, Miss Ludlow, we are here because, in the matter of Mr. Bellini's demise, facts have ossified into conclusions. The time for speculation has passed. Cora's chin dipped slightly, as though in courtesy. Wolfe shifted, slow as syrup. You were told Bellini died in Naples, that he fled, outwitted justice, and vanished into mist. That was convenient. Morgenstern coughed. Wolfe ignored it. Bellini did leave the country. He traveled under his own name, likely to escape prosecution for the theft of Morgenstern's funds. The forgery was crude, but the ledger convincing. However, Wolfe's voice darkened like overcast sky. He did not die overseas. Cora tilted her head. Wolfe caught it. He died here, in New York, in an apartment leased under a false name, filled with props. A Neapolitan postcard, a torn opera program, a suitcase lined with lavender paper. Morgenstern looked up sharply. But we saw— No, Wolfe interrupted. You saw a story. The corpse was not Bellini's. It was a cousin. Similar build, similar jawline, similar dental work. Leach muttered, Good God. Wolfe took a breath. Bellini orchestrated it to cover his escape. A clever ruse, almost worthy of admiration. But someone out-clevered him. His eyes moved, slow and deliberate, and rested on Cora. You, Miss Ludlow. Cora met his gaze. Her expression remained composed, as if she were merely awaiting a bill at a dinner party. Wolfe's hands pressed together. You intercepted his plan. You discovered the ledger, the theft, the villa. You realized that Morgenstern's silence could be bought, not with money, but with certainty. Bellini had left a trail, and you followed it. You found the cousin. You arranged the body, and then you killed Bellini. A muscle ticked in Enzo's cheek. You used Mr. Enzo to impersonate him, Wolfe continued. For the postcard, for the trunks, for the illusion of flight. The thumbprint was the mistake, but understandable. Orchid stain, even gloved hands carry oil. That print on the postcard matched Enzo's right thumb. It proved nothing, but it suggested much. I watched Cora closely. Not a flicker. Wolfe leaned back slightly. The final proof, however, was the hidden compartment, the one Miss Ludlow so dutifully directed us away from. She assumed it held Bellini's stolen funds. Morgenstern interjected. It didn't? No, Wolfe replied. It held a deed, notarized, legal. The villa was never Bellini's to sell. He'd forged the paperwork, But the true deed was here, in New York. That, Miss Ludlow, is what you killed for. Still no reaction. You didn't want Bellini's money. You wanted the villa. You wanted the estate without legal entanglement, without scandal, without witnesses. Bellini was a problem, so you removed him. Cora's lips parted. You have no body. Wolfe nodded. True, but I have everything else. Enzo's fingerprint, your train reservation, the telegram you forged to lure Bellini to the warehouse, the receipt for the trunks, and the second postcard, the one you wrote in advance and mailed after he was already dead. I added quietly, from a box near 86th and Broadway, postmarked the next morning. Cora turned for the first time to look at me, calm, thoughtful. Then she looked back to Wolfe. You don't believe in innocence, she said. Wolfe didn't smile. On the contrary, I believe in clarity, and your clarity, Miss Ludlow, is breathtaking. Enzo straightened. I didn't know. She said it was just a show, that he was fine. Wolfe's voice dropped. And so, loyalty cloaked murder. Leach stood suddenly. I don't want to hear any more. This is obscene. Morgenstern looked like a man trying to vanish into a suit 2 sizes too large. Wolfe gestured. Mr. Goodwin. I opened the office door. Kramer was waiting, fedora in hand. He stepped in, took one look around, and sighed. I figured, he said. Cora rose. She smoothed her gloves, picked up her handbag, and nodded once to me. Mr. Goodwin. Ma'am, she turned to Wolfe. You missed your calling. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I did not. I despise courtrooms. Kramer cuffed her gently. You know the drill. She walked with him, spine unbent. Enzo followed, head low. The door closed. Silence returned. Wolfe lifted his glass. Madeira, Fritz. Fritz appeared, ghost-like, and poured. Wolfe didn't toast. He simply drank. I sat across from him. You knew the whole time? No, Wolfe said. Only since the print. The rest was deduction. And the quality of her gloves. I blinked.
Her gloves? Kid leather, hand-stitched, but worn on the inner seams. Not new, not display, used. He sipped. She had opened trunks. The warmth of the room returned slowly, as if it had held its breath. The curtain had fallen, and the villain had bowed. The knock came at 10 minutes past noon. 3 even raps, followed by a pause, then 2 more. I'd heard it before, once at the Bancroft, when Cora Ludlow had wanted to seem polite while holding a dagger behind her teeth. I opened the door the regulation 8 inches and no more. There they stood, Cora in pale grey wool and Enzo 2 steps behind, hat in hand. Neither smiled. Mr. Goodwin, she said. Miss Ludlow, you're expected. She stepped inside without waiting. The hallway seemed to narrow as she passed. Enzo followed, slower, eyes scanning the walnut panelling like it might sprout accusations. I shut the door, fastened the chain, and led them to the office. Wolfe hadn't risen. He never did. He sat like a monarch in the yellow chair, fingers steepled, gaze fixed. The red chairs faced him, 2 side by side. Cora took one without prompting. Enzo hesitated, then sat as well. Wolfe inclined his head. Miss Ludlow, Mr. Enzo, thank you for coming. I trust you understand the purpose of this meeting. Mr. Goodwin said it was about Mr. Bellini's estate, Cora said. An inheritance review. An approximation, Wolfe replied. One might say we are reviewing possessions. Yours, Bellini's, and those of the truth. I stayed standing, notepad in hand, pencil still. The silence that followed wasn't thick, it was surgical. Wolfe began. We will start with Bellini. A fraud, certainly. A thief, probably. But not a fool. He left clues, whether by design or omission. You knew him, Miss Ludlow. You invested in him. I invested in a production, she said. That's hardly a crime. Unless the production is a fiction or a murder. Enzo shifted. Wolfe ignored it. Bellini fled with forged documents. We have established that. But what follows is more choreographed. He reached to the side table and lifted a single folded slip. I recognized it. A receipt. This, Miss Ludlow, is a document you signed, payment rendered to Mr. Enzo, dated 3 weeks before Bellini's supposed death, labelled Consulting for the Minerva Project. Cora didn't blink. So? The Minerva was cancelled months prior, yet you paid him for it. She tilted her chin. I honour agreements, even failed ones. Wolfe's lip curled. Indeed. How noble. He placed the slip on the desk. Now, he said, Mr. Enzo, you claim to have last seen Bellini in Naples. Enzo cleared his throat. Yes. Wolfe nodded. Then perhaps you can explain this. I stepped forward and laid down the photo. Matte finish. Slightly curled. It showed Cora and Enzo seated at an outdoor cafe. A placard in the background read Hotel Minerva. The awning above the table bore the date, stamped, not faded, 4 days after Bellini's official death. Cora leaned forward, her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. That photograph, Wolfe said, was taken by a honeymooner from Des Moines. He mistook you for stage actors he'd seen in Cleveland. The photo was part of a vacation role developed last week. Cora's voice was soft. It proves nothing. It proves, Wolfe said, that you were together, that Bellini's timeline was false, that his death was staged. Enzo swallowed. I didn't know he was dead. No? Wolfe asked. Yet you collected a fee for impersonating him. You mailed the second postcard. You lifted a suitcase. Enzo looked to Cora. She didn't meet his eyes. Wolfe turned to her again. You forged Bellini's final letter. The handwriting matches a stage note from the Don Carlos rehearsal. The ink, too. Same brand, same fountain pen. Cora exhaled, sharp and deliberate. You have your theories, she said. I have facts, Wolfe replied. You killed Bellini because he refused to give up the deed. The villa mattered to you, not the man. I did not kill him. No, Wolfe said. You instructed Mr. Enzo to do so. But when he faltered, you arranged the cousin. You staged the apartment. You mailed the letters. You lured Morgenstern. You composed the fiction. Enzo whispered. She said he was in hiding, that it was all theatre. Cora stood. This is absurd. It is inevitable, Wolfe said. The room fell quiet. I glanced toward the hall. The bell rang, twice. I crossed to open the door. Inspector Kramer stepped in, trenchcoat dusted with wind. He had the expression of a man chewing broken glass. Wolfe gestured. Kramer said nothing at first. He walked to the desk, looked at the photo, then at Cora. This you? Cora lifted her chin. What happens now? You tell it to the DA, Kramer said. Let's go. She looked at Wolfe. You think you've solved it? I think, Wolfe said, that you played your role too well. She turned to me. You believed me. I shook my head. I listened. That's different. Kramer cuffed her left wrist. Enzo stepped forward. I'll come. Kramer nodded. Both of you. They left without protest. The door closed. Wolfe sighed. Fritz. Beer. The case was over, the curtain down, and this time the applause was silence. The torn ticket curled in the ashtray like a vow that had collapsed in on itself. One end was already blackened, curling into ash, though I hadn't lit a match. Wolfe had returned to his chair with the indifference of a man who'd outlived a dozen wars and 25 clients with more emotion than honesty. Fritz came in quietly, placed the tray down, and retreated just as silently. The beer was cold, poured already, a wedge of foam hovering near the lip of Wolfe's glass, like a punctuation mark he hadn't yet spoken. Wolfe turned the page of a thick, red-bound volume. From where I sat, the spine read Roman Inheritance Law, Volume 3. His thumb held it open precisely. His gaze stayed still. It was a study in refusal to engage, to mourn, to be anything but untouched. The fire snapped once. I leaned back in the red chair, Wolfe's client chair, now the seat of reflection. There was no client anymore, only a villa on Capri, a faked death, and a photograph no one would claim taking. Will you keep that? I asked. I nodded toward the ticket. He didn't look up. Why would I? I swirled my drink. Souvenir. Proof. Or maybe penance. He snorted. If I desired penance, I would attend a church, not preserve litter. I watched the ashes collapse inward. The ticket had been tucked inside the last will, folded behind the date-stamped legal insert. Fritz had handed me the envelope after breakfast. No one had asked where it came from. I hadn't asked either. "Do you believe he made it?" I asked. "To Capri?" Wolfe lifted his eyes, not to me but to the fireplace. "No." I waited. He added nothing. Outside the window, Manhattan softened itself in fog. Traffic was a hush. The 11th hour had the calm of a cathedral after a sermon. "Fritz said the stewardess from TWA had come by," I said. "She had." "What did she say?" "That she hadn't known the man in seat 14A was dead until after the wheels touched down." "That's a long flight to fake breathing." "She was not the brightest stewardess in her cohort," Wolfe said. I reached forward and flicked the ticket into the fire. The edge caught. "You said the villa wasn't worth it," I said. "You said no one would stage a murder for a crumbling view of Italian surf." "I said no sane man would," Wolfe corrected. The ticket burned. Ink disappeared first, then numbers. Capri became nothing but smoke. He turned another page. "It was a beautiful villa," I said. "In the photos, before the landslide." "Ah, yes, the landslide." I sipped the beer Fritz had left for me. It had gone lukewarm, still drinkable. "I don't think she loved him," I said. "Not really." Wolfe made a small sound. Agreement, perhaps. "I think she wanted the villa. And he wanted her. That's always the wrong direction for a dream." Wolfe turned a page. "She said she'd never been," I said. "To Capri?" I nodded. "She lied," Wolfe said. We sat in the comfortable silence of the case having ended, the world realigning itself, one cracked tile at a time. "Kramer dropped off the passport?" I asked. "Yes." "Did it have stamps?" "One, Lisbon." "Not Naples?" "No." We didn't speak for a while. "I looked it up," I said. "There's no ferry to Capri in winter." Wolfe inclined his head. "And the airport's been shut since 43. "That is correct." "So the ticket was nonsense from the start." "No," Wolfe said. "It was symbolic." I leaned back, exhaled. "Cora kept the villa papers in her coat lining. That part still gets me." Wolfe shut the book. "She didn't trust anyone, he said. "Not even Enzo." "Especially not Enzo." "She loved the villa." "She loved owning the villa," Wolfe corrected. "Ownership is not affection." "Is that why you never owned a vacation home?" I asked. Wolfe gave me a look. "I do not vacation." "I've noticed," he sighed. "Archie, must we eulogize them all?" "No," I said. "But this one deserves something." He reached for his beer. "Why?" I watched the fire gnaw the edge of a half-burned log. "Because Bellini was smarter than I gave him credit for, and not quite smart enough." Wolfe drank. I added, "And because Cora made a man disappear, twice." "She made him reappear once too." "Did she?" I asked. "That photo from the docks." He looked tired, thinner. "Death is a kind of diet," Wolfe muttered. I smiled. "Do you think they planned it together from the start?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said. "He wrote too much poetry." "The note in the camera case?" He nodded. "Was it real?" "I believe so." "To vanish is not to win," I quoted. "A man in hiding has already surrendered," Wolfe said. The log popped. Sparks climbed the chimney like startled thoughts. "I told Kramer we'd found everything," I said. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "I lied," I added. Wolfe gave a soft grunt. He did not press me. I reached into my jacket, unfolded a scrap. It was torn from the envelope that had come with the will. The reverse was blank, but the handwriting matched Bellini's. The slant, the pressure. Wolfe said nothing. I placed it in the ashtray beside the charred edge of the ticket. "Capri," I said aloud, "has always sounded like a lie." "A romantic one," Wolfe added. The scrap curled but didn't catch fire. "He meant to send it," I said, "but didn't." "No." The clock on the mantel ticked, a soft, stately rhythm, like a man walking out of his own life with no need to run. "I'd like to visit someday," I said. "You," Wolfe said, "you loathe boats." "There's an airport now." "Your geography is outdated." "So is our furniture," I said, tapping the arm of the red chair. He didn't deny it. "I might use vacation days," I said. "Even detectives get them." "You are not a detective," Wolfe said. "You are my legman." Who solves cases? With guidance, I smiled. The rain outside thickened to mist, the kind that lingers on hat brims and makes doormen scowl. Do you think Enzo knew about the second will? I asked. No. Then how'd he end up with it? Cora. She planted it. She retrieved it. From where? Lisbon. How? Wolfe reached for his book again. You won't tell me? I don't indulge in hypotheticals. It's not hypothetical if it happened. He flipped the page. Fine, I said. Fritz knows. Fritz suspects. That's enough for me. Wolfe lifted his gaze. It shouldn't be. The firelight danced on the spines of the legal volumes. Shadows leaned like old men around the edge of Wolfe's desk. I've sent the suitcase to the archives, I said. Why? In case someone else cares. No one will. I might. He sighed. You kept the postcard, he said. I did. The one from Bellini. Lucien, I corrected. He gave me a look. It was addressed to me, I said. It was addressed to you because I do not reply. It said, the sun never sets if you don't chase it. Trite. True, I said. He closed the book. The thud was soft but final. Do not romanticize this, Wolfe said. I'm not. Yes, you are. I'm just remembering, I said. He paused. Then remember this. He pointed toward the ashtray. The sea conceals, he said, but it does not forgive. I nodded. Neither does Wolfe. He reached for his beer. I leaned back. In the ashtray, the last of the torn ticket turned to grey. Capri was gone. Bellini was gone. Cora was booked under a different name, headed for Algiers. Enzo had confessed in the back of Kramer's squad car, but only to the part about the photograph. The villa on the cliff had collapsed in the landslide 5 years before, but no one had told Bellini. Or maybe someone had. Maybe that's why he died. Some men fake their deaths for a villa. Some get buried for one. Either way, no one ever sees Capri.